Welcome to the Insights to Communicate podcast with Adam Probalski, where market and opinion research come together with public affairs and PR.
Okay, welcome to the podcast. Carlos Sierra, based in Texas, spends time in other parts of the Southwest. Is a political consultant, does some public affairs work, corporate government kind of stuff as well, and is kind of unique because he's kind of like us. He's nonpartisan or multi-partisan, works across the spectrum, which I appreciate. Carlos, why don't you tell us a little about your story, where you started, how you got to this successful point in the political public affairs world?
Great. Well, thanks for having me, Adam. Appreciate it, man. I got the political bug back in the 2000 Republican primary. I saw a PBS back, and I was 17, 18 at the time. And I saw a documentary on John McCain at the time. And it was that kind of black and white video when he's coming back from Vietnam, after serving 5.5 years in Hanoi Hilton. I didn't know who the heck he was, and did some research. And at that time he was running against, then my governor Bush, in Texas. Right. Being from El Paso, Governor Bush was my governor at the time, but I really like this guy's story. I've always had a passion for history and government. And so, I reached out to the campaign and got connected, and was basically an intern during that 2000 primary race. Just the basic stuff like phone banking and just basic stuff like that, getting lists together and all that, and volunteer work. And then I just happened to go to the University of Arizona in Tucson, where Senator McCain had an office there in Tucson. And that was my first internship in 2001. I was an intern in the Tucson office. Also spent some time in his DC office. And then as soon as he hired me my sophomore year in college. And I went on to, as soon as I graduated, I became his director of community outreach for Arizona. So moved up to Phoenix and ended up being with him for about, 10, 11 years total. Did his campaigns and worked on the Senate side. And so it was like a crash course, just working for one of the most influential, arguably most powerful senators in Congress at the time. And then he ran for president and again in 2008. And it's funny because we started that campaign in 4 years before that race with Straight Talk America PAC. He was out there doing stuff already. And so I really got a firsthand experience just seeing how presidential campaigns are kicked off and all that. So I got a crash course in all that, and I fell in love with it. I just loved it even more. And that's kind of how I got my start in politics. So Senator McCain, and he's my mentor, my hero, and I think our country would be better off, obviously with him still in Congress trying to get stuff done.
Yeah, that's mad respect for Senator McCain. I've got a great Senator McCain story. I was with my, before we were married, but my wife at the Grand Canyon, and I forget the name of the big lodge there at the Grand Canyon, and
El Tovar.
Yeah, exactly. So where it's like after our long day of hiking down, I mean, not too far down, a couple miles, it's still pretty darn hard coming back up in a monsoon. And we were going to dinner there at the El Tovar, and we're walking in, and my wife was a political fundraiser and had just done an event with Senator McCain like a month before in California. And we walk in, and as we're walking in, she's like, "Wouldn't it be funny if we saw Senator McCain?" I'm like, "Come on, it's a big state. There's no way we're going to see Senator McCain happen to be." And as we're discussing it, there's Senator McCain at the El Tovar, it's just ridiculous that we did that.
Was that during the presidential campaign?
I guess it was. I mean, early on, because he didn't have any Secret Service around him; he just had his staff. But yeah, it was or maybe his post. It was probably post presidential campaign.
Okay, because we did a trip right before. Kind of right in between the primary, after the primary and the general. he said he wanted to do a rim to rim.
Oh,
And so I was actually in charge of that. So I had to organize it all, get with the superintendent of the Grand Canyon, and we kept saying, "Are you sure you want to do this, Senator?" But if you remember, they're trying to pit this, old white guy against this young, spry Obama,
right.
and so we needed something. I think he wanted to prove himself that he still had it in him, and he did rim to rim. If that's a trip it's the same trip we're talking about. He did rim to rim, and yeah, like he survived it, and it's like I'm sure he regretted it because I haven't even done that, and he did it with his son and the superintendent and a couple other guys, and
wow,
and I thought he was nuts for doing that at that age, and yeah, he got it done. So it might be that same trip that he was there. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, it was a very, very exciting moment to run into him there. So, so you did early on, you did politics. Tell us kind of how you made the transition to, owning your own shop and doing politics, throughout the Southwest, other parts of the country. Like, how do you make that jump from, campaign, working for the senator in DC or on the government payroll, and then go into the I'm running my own show?
Yeah, so I was there's only two staffers during the 2008 presidential, and actually it's really 2007 because we got the primary going. So I took a leave. Well, it was called a 50-50 split. So the Senate allows us to join, jump on the campaign staff, get paid 50%, but we have to, we only get 50% of our Senate paycheck. Right. So at the time, there was two of us that were doing that, myself and the guy who was helping advance, Joe Donahue in the DC office. So I left to Iowa full time, moved up there and was kind of, running the shop there for a while. And then we were able to hire staff. We went through all kinds of, headaches for a while. We were on top for a while, and then we were in last place, and it was a roller coaster that 2008 Republican primary. And so I eventually took a leave to go to South Carolina after that, and went to a lot of the states in Texas, where we wrapped up the nomination. And yeah, I stayed on the campaign, and then for the general, I became the Southwest Coalition's director. And then, unfortunately, after we lost, I did go back to the Senate office. But during that time, I met Governor Buddy Roemer on the trail, and me and him just really hit it off. He was the, former congressman, former governor of Louisiana. And then he was, started a bunch of banks throughout the South, and he was one of McCain's economic advisors. And so, he and I became very good friends, and we hit it off. And he called me in like 2010. He called me and asked, he said he was thinking of running for president, and I told him he was crazy. And he asked if I would ever leave the senator's office to help him, put a team together. And I said, I don't know, man. I got my steady government paycheck. I got benefits. I got 2 kids now. I don't know if I want to do that again. And then it's funny because I thought about it, prayed about it, and I decided to go ahead and do it. Excuse me. And then we kept talking about it. And then that's when he told me that he's like, well, and I should have told you, Carlos, I just want to take $100 donation maximum, no PAC money, no lobbyist money. We're going to run on a campaign to reform and ending the corrupting influence of special interests and all. And I loved it, but it's like, how the hell are we going to run a national campaign with $100 campaign limit? Yeah. You want to take public financing on top of it all. So I was like, man, what did I just do? I just left, my career with McCain to jump on this campaign. And honestly, it was the best decision I ever made because, I learned a lot about the campaign world. We got to travel the country. Obviously he didn't get much traction early on just because, the media didn't give him the time of day, with the debates. And if you don't make those presidential debates, no one's going to know who you are. To this day, he's the best speaker I've ever heard in my life. Like, he is the best speaker, orator. And, he went to Harvard when he was 16, got his MBA at Harvard. Guy's a genius. He's a genius. Wow. And unfortunately, just because of his little, I still call it a gimmick, the $100 donation cap and no super PAC, no lobbyist money, all that, the media kind of just didn't pay much attention to him. But I learned a lot. I don't know we were part of the super PAC with Stephen Colbert also. So we got some traction. I don't know if you remember, but Stephen Colbert was doing like a super PAC, Tandall super PACs. And so we got to do some fun stuff like that, work with some celebrities to talk about the special influence, the special interest and money in politics, because that was big at the time with Citizens United.
Right.
And so, yeah, I don't regret it. And then after that, I decided I was kind of done with government work. I didn't really want to go back to McCain's office and do the whole 8 to 5 thing. And that's when I decided to open up my own shop. Yeah, no, I mean, I was able to, thank God, continue to get clients, and that's where I got my start in opening my Renegade Public Affairs.
And so you open up a public affairs shop, and you just like tell people how that works. Like you say, okay, I'm doing this. Did you have your first client first, or did you just like put up a website, print some business cards, and say, hire me? Or how do you and how do you tell your your family or your close friends, like, oh yeah, I'm now a political consultant? Like, how does that functionally work?
Yeah, so that was actually a very, I'm not gonna lie, it was a scary part, because I got 2 kids, I got a mortgage, I got loans to pay, and I was making, I was still able to pay myself during the buddy campaign, and then so yeah, no, it was I had to save my, the money I was making on the Buddy Romer campaign. I had to save that, and then build my website, get, like you said, literally get my business cards, and then I made a ton of contacts. Being McCain's director of outreach in Arizona, I made a ton of contacts in Arizona throughout that time. I mean, when you're working with someone like McCain, I mean, you're involved in a lot of meetings and decision making in Arizona, and so I was tied to a lot of the politicos already throughout that time. And so first thing I did was email everyone on my Rolodex and let them know what I was doing. And yeah, right out the gate, I started getting clients in Arizona right away. That was my, the low hanging fruit for me. And that's when actually my very first client after the Buddy campaign was a committee to defeat Sheriff Joe Arpaio. And Nice. It was me and now Congressman Gallego. Now he's a Congressman Gallego running for Senate. So me and him I was the chairman. We were both co-chairs, and I was the campaign manager. And then, yeah, me and Ruben just continued. He was a state legislator at the time and worked for Strategies 360. And yeah, we just, were able to raise a good chunk of change just to beat the crap out of Joe Arpaio. And, we weren't successful that time, but we were successful the next round in taking him out. And so I started getting a lot of clients like that having to do with, the anti-immigrants, far right fringe of my party at the time. Right. is that was kind of my job in Arizona, is to try to get rid of them. So we got, we recalled Russell Pierce, who was the author of SB 1070. And, so that's, I started kind of building a name for myself of one with Buddy and McCain, kind of working for Mavericks and your moderate Republicans. And then also, working for pro, immigrant groups. So that was kind of how I was able to get some of that low hanging fruit. And then from there, you just, as you get victories, you start to build a name for yourself, and more people come to you.
And talk about that for a little bit, because I experienced something a little bit similar. Like, I grew up in party politics and Republican politics, but today and for a decade or more, we've been nonpartisan. We work across the board. You have too. What does that look like? I know I certainly during the first Trump campaign got like a massive amount of hate from people, because I was pretty vocal about my feeling about this guy being not right for America, let's say, to be kind. How does that work, growing up in Republican politics, and then all of a sudden somebody says, somebody starts to realize you're not on their team all the time? How'd that play out?
It's funny, because my first part of my job as McCain's outreach director, I would go to the precinct committee meetings in Arizona. And those things were awful, man. Like, I would go to Mojave County, like Kingman, Arizona, the upper left part of the state, as red as you can get in the whole country. And yeah, I would go there and represent McCain's office. Here I am, this Mexican looking guy, from El Paso, Texas, representing the Republican senior senator. And so that was back in like 2003, 2004. And I started to see this shift. I was like, man, this my party's kind of crazy when it comes to this immigration thing. And I was like, we're gonna lose a lot of people. And then what made it worse for us too is we came out with the McCain Kennedy immigration bill around 2005, 2006. And oh my God, I mean, we had Rush Limbaugh against us. We had, Savage. We had every AM radio host against us, calling in, getting their callers to bash us. And so the Senate office was, nonstop. And so, yeah, I mean, I got a taste of that early on in my career with McCain, and going against the grain and kind of, going against the party. I don't even know if it's called going against the party really, but yeah, we got a taste of that early on.
Just kind of speaking your truth, or just being true to reality, or whatever it might be. Like I had no problem telling people that they were insane, on like something like immigration.
Yeah, no, they were, and just hearing them talk, and I would tell McCain after I'd meet with all these people too, because our goal was to try to get that McCain Kennedy bill passed, and it was the fact that we had Kennedy's name on the bill that was already a deal breaker. How dare we have Kennedy on the bill? And then it was like, I go in to explain it. Our bill dealt with the economic situation, the undocumented that were in the country already. It dealt with border security. I mean, it was a good bill. We met with everybody from unions to chambers of commerce, and it was a really good, well thought out bill. But there was that's what for the first time, that's when I started to sense the racist element of my party. And I was like, these guys don't want a solution, man. They just don't like brown people. They just don't. And it's not all of them, but it's like I got firsthand taste of that.
So you're not necessarily welcome in every Republican quarter at some point, and then you kind of show up and you've got some alignment with, let's say, a Democrat campaign or a policy issue. Are you welcomed there, or how does that work? Are there places where you're not welcome on both sides because you're not bought in? Like you're not a hardcore conservative, you're not a hardcore progressive. So like there's some places there are no-go zones for people like you.
Yeah, what I learned too, because I spoke at the the Association of Political Consultants back in California, and I try to go all to the APC events and the the campaigns and elections, stuff like that too. And so I'm friends with everybody on both sides, and but the thing is, when it comes to like contracts, you have to be committed. Like if I want an RNC contract or a DNC contract, I have to commit to not helping the the other party. And so financially, I learned that quick. It's like, hey man, how come, this was back when my friend was, one of the attorneys at the RNC. It's like, hey man, I'm qualified to get some of these contracts. What's going on? And they're like, yeah, it's because you helped the other side. You have to commit and basically sign an oath not to sign. So a long time ago, I learned that I was probably never going to get like an RNC or a DNC contract or any of the committees. So I never really tried, wasted my time on any of those. But yeah, I do. There is a sense of kind of, it's like, what are you, and I'm big in the independent movement, so I also was the deputy campaign manager for the Gary Johnson, Bill Weld campaign, in 2016. And it was the most successful libertarian, race ever, vote percentage, money raised. And, for a while we were polling, and I don't know if you did polling on that, but I mean, for a while we were polling, 15 to 17%. I think the New York Times poll was the highest at like 17%. And as to get into that national debate, with Trump and Hillary, you have to be polling at 15%. And so we were there, and then Aleppo happened, and then we just tumbled after that. We were never able to recover after Aleppo. And so, yeah, I have a soft spot for independence, third party. I think, like the no labels, I learned that it's very skewed, obviously, to the two-party system, especially on the ballot access. I got Gary Johnson and Bill Weld on all 50 state ballots, and it's 50 different laws, and they all try to screw third-party independence, and and it was just sad seeing that, that it's a very undemocratic process if you're not a Democrat or a Republican. So I try to fight that throughout the country. I'm a big supporter of open primaries, and allowing independents to vote in primary elections. So yeah, I'm very involved with the reform movement, and yeah, does it cost me some business? Of course, because, I'm not going to be, I'll probably never get those DNC or RNC contracts, but, I do okay.
So let's talk a little bit about your tech stack. You've got I think a small shop. So what's your typical tech you use every day for creating and for communicating? How do you do all that?
Yeah. So another thing I learned too later on in life is that I would be a general consultant, and then I would sub everything out from mail to digital to, texting, you name it. I would just, as long as I'm getting my monthly retainer as a general consultant, I would just pass everything else out to my friends or whatever. And then I became a smarter businessman, and I was like, why don't I do that in house? Like, why am I subbing that out? So I started, brought on a graphic designer to start doing the mail. I built a texting platform in 2020. And right when COVID hit, that was just a coincidence that I decided to do that during COVID. I made more money on texting in 2020, than on my normal general consulting. Like for a while, I wasn't even like doing much general consulting. I just was focused on the texting because I got so many texting clients because of COVID. A lot of people weren't doing their traditional ground game, and so the texting kind of really took over in 2020 for me. And that's still a big moneymaker for me. So, the digital, ever since we were allowed to upload the voter database to, digital platforms like Facebook and Google and all that stuff like that, digital component has really changed the campaign world. Now I'm a big, like programmatic, like OTT, CTV type of stuff. I'm big on the voter database and data. And so I don't spend a whole lot on TV, for some of my races, because I do a lot of local races, a lot of, if you're doing a congressional or, statewide, obviously TV is still, linear is still important, but I just like breaking stuff down. Like I love the OTT, CTV, all the new technology that's available. And then you add texting to it, even the mail, I talk to the postal service all the time too. And, they got that informed delivery that you could, do stuff with the mail also. So I'm always looking for the latest technology to help my campaigns and to save a buck, because I do get a lot of those campaigns that don't have the $1 million+ budgets either, right? So I'm always trying to find ways to kind of help my clients. And I've gained a lot of respect from my clients too, because I'm not ripping them off. Like I'm not one of those, I'm not a, I don't have a big shop in DC or anything like that. No offense if you do, but like I just, I want to be home. I have a beautiful granddaughter now, so I'm trying not to travel as much. So I'm very picky on who I get. So, and yeah, you do get more clients as you win. So I really do invest in all my clients and really try to run the best, affordable campaign that I can.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I was just talking about it with someone else. How I like my family. I like my wife. I like my kids. So I don't travel as much because it's just not as fun as it used to be. And thankfully, tools like Zoom really kind of make a difference in being able to accommodate that.
Yeah, it was cool when I was like in my 20s, like, and I'll be honest, I lost my relationship in 2008, during that presidential campaign. I was on the road for almost 2 years, and so by the time I came back in 2009, me and the mother of my children separated. Oh, wow. After 10 years together, we separated, and I'm not gonna lie, it was because of being on the road for almost 2 years with the McCain campaign. It takes a toll on relationships. And so later on, I learned it's not worth it. I'd rather be home and, be with my family and, figure it out from there,
Yeah, totally. All right. So to wrap, like mantra, your words to live by, what runs through your head all the time? What do you tell others? Like, this is how you ever run your life or run your politics. Like what goes through your head all the time?
I live by I love McCain and people like Buddy and Gary. They were Mavericks,
right.
So I love my golden retriever's named Maverick. So, just that whole concept of doing the right thing. I think, when McCain was a senator, every major piece of legislation, whether it was climate change, immigration, you name it, we always had to have a Democratic co-sponsor to it. We always worked across the aisle, and it was the way we would get things done. It's the way what made him successful. And you don't see that anymore. I mean, we don't talk across the aisle. We don't, go have a drink with the other side anymore. It's like, it's just this vitriol and hatred. Right. And we're never going to get stuff done for the American people if that's the way we are. So I wish we could go back to the way things used to be, where we could kind of, as cliche it is, all get along. But, I think we're missing the maverick senators, the maverick congressmen, those types of people. And those are the kind of people I like helping to get elected. We need more of that. And I think a lot of the consultants in my business, my world, I hate to say it, but they sell out. Obviously, they get these big checks, millions of dollars from the Trump campaign or the RNC and DNC, and to them it's a paycheck. But I got in this to try to change the world. I was an idealist, and I still think we can if we get the right people in office. And so I might not be a millionaire consultant, but at least I can sleep at night.
That's worthwhile. That means a lot. Well, thank you, Carlos, for joining the podcast, and hopefully we'll keep the conversation going.
Cool. Nice to meet you. Thank you, Adam.
This has been Insights to Communicate with Adam Probalski, president of the woman and Latina-owned market and opinion research firm, Probalski Research.